Hey guys, into the end here. We have a slightly different video today. I'm gonna talk about Gauntlet grinding. A little while back, someone has asked me on one of my videos to do a deck tech on a good Gauntlet deck. And to be perfectly honest, I don't do a lot of Gauntlet grinding. I just play ranked all day long because I think it's a little bit more fun and interactive, and like to brew interesting decks. So I always want to test it against real opponents. But for grinding Gauntlet, I think there's a legitimate reason for grinding Gauntlet, and it's one of the faster ways to get gold once you have earned your 10 wins in ranked, because Gauntlet is much easier to win, and the games in Gauntlet are faster. So our goal for today's deck is, number one, we want to make a budget Gauntlet deck that doesn't have any legendaries in it, which was a request from one of my subscribers. And two, we want a deck that's relatively fast. So we want to be able to finish the games as quickly as possible to maximize our gold per hour. So I've picked Hooru as my deck of choice. I've tested this deck quite a bit over the last week and a half or so, and the results has been pretty good. I've actually only ever lost one game out of maybe half a dozen Gauntlet runs. And I lost the game because I was dumb and I picked a 2-power hand and I never drew another power and lost with a whole bunch of good cards in my hand at 2 power. That's entirely my own fault. So this deck is first of all, it's Hooru, and the game plan of this deck is to simply kill the opponent as quickly as possible with very powerful evasive threats, namely flying units. But because we're playing against AI, we do have a bunch of cards in here that is specifically designed, or not designed, but specifically selected to beat computer AI, because computer AI has a lot of problems and you can take advantage of it if you know about them. So let's go through the deck list starting from the 1-drops. Finest Hour, so computer AIs almost never ever play around tricks. So basically, any kind of tricks like Finest Hour, Strength of Many, those kind of things are really good. Your opponent will never play around it, which will guarantee you a trade for their best unit with a 1-power spell like Finest Hour. So 4 of those in the deck. Every deck needs some number of removal spells to deal with large units that you couldn't handle in combat. So in this deck, we have 3 Permafrost, 4 Vanquish, and 4 Harsh Rule, and that's very important actually. So not a lot of removal. It's a total of 11 removal spells, but I think that's enough because I guess you can count the Auric Runehammer as removal spell, so that's more of a 8, 11, 14 removal spells, which is a pretty good number, especially because one of the removal spells can kill multiple units. The number of these removal spells, I think, is something you can tweak around with. You can always put in less Permafrost, more Hammer, etc., or even other removal spells like Entrapment. But this is the suite that I've chosen to go with. Permafrost does have a counter synergy with Auric Runehammer. If you Permafrost something, you still can't hammer your opponent in the face until you actually kill it. So if it's a unit that's very large, then you actually can never Runehammer your opponent. Your hammer just gonna sit there until this next unit comes up. So it's a bit of a nomble there, but I think it's fine. So starting as early as the 2-drop slot, because our game plan is simply to race our opponent in the air, all we want is a bunch of good ground units to stall out the game for a few turns. This deck does kill people really fast once it gets going. So on a 2-drop slot, I have just 2 units. Actually, well, on the ground 2-drop slot, I only have 2 units. Both of them are very good blockers. In the case of Copperhall Porter, it's a good blocker because we don't care if it dies. Sometimes we want it to die so we can get a Justice Sigil out of it. This deck only plays 25 Sigil, so this is essentially a power source 26th and 27th, but also can often trade with opponent's 2-power unit as well, which is quite good. Borderlands Waykeeper is good because it computer's not very smart. If it wants to attack you through the Waykeeper, it actually will use a removal spell to try and get through it. And it would take 2 removal spells. So you're basically luring removal out of the computer AI for a very crappy unit. And later in the game, if you draw it later, it's not useless because you can always make it a flying threat. A 2/3 flying threat is not great, but it's still chip damage in the air, and sometimes when you're racing, that 2 damage will matter. So Tinker Overseer is just one of the cheaper 2 attack flying units you can get. It has some passive synergies with Auric Runehammer. Sometimes you can buff it, but it's there just because it's a fairly cheap, effective, efficient 2/2 flyer. Copperhall Bailiff is very, very good against computer AI. They will never play around tricks or board sweepers like Harsh Rule or effects like this. So they will play all their units, you clock up the ground, you hit him in the air for 3 or 5 damage a turn, and then you play a Copperhall Bailiff and you massively reduce his board attack power, and that will buy you more than enough time to finish him off. And against certain matchups, you can also knock Aegis off their units, but Copperhall Bailiff is a bit of an all-star when you want to clock up the board and just stall out. Valkyrie Enforcer is one of the best 3-power units in basically the game, I think. It's extremely versatile, it's never dead. 3 power, 3/3 flying is an okay body, but the ability is just invaluable. There is a lot of very tricky decks out there, especially with the introduction of Dusk Road. There's actually some very broken AI decks out there. I've played against a few that I thought were far too powerful. I think for a lot of players who are new to the game, if you are actually just looking at budget lists, there are some decks with lots of legendaries that just is really hard to beat. And Valkyrie Enforcer goes a long way towards dealing with those powerful legendaries. I've had opponent cast Rindra on me on turn 4 and turn 5, which I think is just crazy. So, for Wisdom of the Elders, because like all decks, there's variance, you will sometimes flood out and you sometimes get power screwed. This will help you draw out of them. Because the deck can clock the ground fairly well, it'll buy you some time and to draw the cards that you need. The 3 Runehammer, it's just an additional sorcery removal spell, and it gives you a little bit of card advantage combined with the Wisdom of the Elders, because often you can kill 2 things before you lose the hammer. So I think that is, and also not very often, but sometimes opponents have Aegis units. This will be very good, but that's very rare. Hammer of Might is the only weapon that we use, and it's a very good one. You basically just want to put this onto one of your flying units and then bash face. And then, of course, the next unit, if you get lucky, the +3 Warcry trigger goes onto another flyer, then the game is certain to be over very quickly. Shelterwing Rider is one of the best flyers you can get in these colors. It's 5 attack is a lot. It ends the game very quickly. And the fact that it has Aegis is icing on the cake. Your opponent will use removal spell on this card, and having a 0/5 body that flies left behind to block with while you're still trying to race with other flying units is really good. So this card is both super offensive and aggressive and really hard to kill, and if your opponent does happen to remove the Aegis, it's still a very good blocker, which goes towards your game plan of clogging up the board. So this card is excellent. And I've chosen not to play Protect to give the Aegis back, because I don't think that interaction is great enough, because the Protect to give this unit the Aegis back to give it +5, I mean, I could have just simply not played Protect and played another really good unit, and that would have been even better. So instead of playing 2 copies of Protect or 3 copies of Protect, I've actually just chosen to play 2 copies of Roland's Honor Guard, and it's a 7-drop, is the top end of our curve. But a lot of games you end up clocking the board and you stall out a little bit, and you can get to 7 net power. And this card really does just end games. A 6/6 flying lifesteal is very, very powerful, and most of the AI decks would not be able to deal with this unless they have a removal spell in their hand. For Harsh Rule, I think this card is one of the most important cards in the deck, and one of the reasons why we are in Hooru to begin with. Because I think Harsh Rule is a card that is incredibly good against AI opponents. They will never play around it. Right? Even if they know that you will have it, they still won't play around it. And against the Gauntlet decks, sometimes you do end up in this board state where you're falling behind, your draw's not very good, your opponent's just got a massive an overwhelming board position, because some of the newer Gauntlet decks is designed that way to give them an overwhelming board position. Like I remember playing against the one with the Gear Cruncher, the Stone Scar Scrapper, and Grenadins. And my opponent will frequently have 12 units in play with a Gear Cruncher and a Scrapper, drawing 2 cards every turn and shooting my units for 14 or 13 or 12, whatever the number is, every turn with his Gear Crunchers. So, and with most decks, that's an unbeatable board state. You wouldn't be able to beat it. And green gives you, or justice, sorry, gives you an out. Harsh Rule is kind of like the final failsafe of the deck, and having that in my hand often makes me feel really safe against AI decks, because the majority of the AI decks are going to be the fighting you on board in combat. There's not too many AI decks that is trying to beat you outside of combat. So most of them are very, very linear, and Harsh Rule is amazing against linear combat-oriented decks. So that's pretty much it. While I'm talking though, I do want to make a very quick switch, and that is to add in some monuments, because having some flying units in the deck is very effective. I'll just put in 2 copies. Having 2 flying units in the deck later on when you're drawing power is very effective, and having a 5 power 4/4 flyer when you're flooding out is really good. So this is my last tweak on the spot. We do run 2 Waystones and 2 Waystones here, but not too many, because I do want the seats to come into play non-depleted on turn 1 if possible. So, although with that said, we don't have a lot of 1-drops. But anyway, this is the deck. What I'm going to do is play a bunch of Gauntlet games, and I'm actually going to do like 2 or 3 Gauntlet runs. And I'm not going to record all the games because it'll be really boring watching me play it against an AI. But what I will do though is I will edit the videos and just sort of cut out the last couple of turns against all the different decks and talk about what happened, and also show you what the board state looks like and what the game looks like when I win, and what I have in my hand and what my opponent has in play. That way it'll give you at least some idea, a feel of how the deck runs, and then I will showcase the full game against the Gauntlet bosses, because those games are a lot more interesting and interactive. Well, sometimes interactive, sometimes they're just busted and you can't win. But yeah, thanks for watching. So in this game, my opponent played a bunch of units. I harsh ruled them away, and then I played Waykeeper and Spirit Guide, and my opponent responded on his turn by playing Jack the Bounty Hunter, which is not an issue here. We can deal with it either with a Finest Hour attacking into him, and he will block because the computer AI is pretty dumb. So if you swing into him and Finest Hour this, it'll be a trade. I understand that, but you know, at least we get that off the table. But luckily for us, we have a Runehammer, so that is an easy kill. And we attack him. So at this point, I think the game is pretty much over. My opponent has, whoa, maybe not. My opponent has 2 cards in their hand, but I have a much more powerful board position than he does. And yeah, that's not going to be a problem for us. Yep. We're just going to go ahead and swing in with these. Yep, we'll make the trade gladly. We're going to go ahead and play out the Enforcer because our deck is looking to finish the game quickly. We're not going to save it for a must-answer thread. Between the Finest Hour and the Hammer here, I think we're going to be okay with whatever thread he plays. Yep, this game should be over pretty quickly. Yep, and my opponent draws nothing, and he dies next turn. We have an Aegis here, so he can't get rid of our hammer, but not like that makes any difference. Okay, and yeah, that's a pretty typical game against the computer AI. Alright, and that was against Volcano Warfare. Okay, in this game, I'm playing against Zenin Devout. Basically, we've just been back and forth racing. He's playing threads, I'm playing some threads and a single removal card. And we've Yeah, we've just been racing all day long. I believe this will kill him. Yes. So, a bunch of flying units. That's all you need. They're all pretty small, 2 power, 2 power, 3 power, 3 power, but it only took 2 or 3 turns of these units attacking to finish my opponent off, and that is a very typical game. Our life total will often not be at 25 because we are racing. We're just taking damage from him, mitigating it wherever we can, but we're really trying to race our opponent in the air because it's the fastest way to finish a game. Alright, this game has been tough. My opponent is using the Voices of the Void. He has brought back his Umbran Reaper twice with Dark Returns. Luckily, I was able to prevent all of the damage from the Umbran Reaper because I had a whole bunch of Aegis from the Cobalt Waystones, and then he had a bunch of units that were pretty gigantic. So here, his board is better than mine. He's able to get rid of the Aegis using a Varus Favor, and this game is a perfect example of why I think that having decks with Harsh Rule is so absolutely vital. It's because this board position that I'm in here is a terrible one, but not anymore. The Harsh Rule has given me a clean reset, and I am way ahead of him on board here. Attacking for 7, he attacks me for 2. I think I'm going to take this race. 7, so I need to attack him 4 more times. The clock is pretty close. But it's much more likely that I can block his 2-4 than he can block my 7-7. So as long as I draw any unit, I should be able to stop his attacks. And he needs to draw specifically like a Sandstorm Titan or something to stop my attacks. And now I am on a 2-turn clock and he's on a 3-turn clock. So, yep, racing is a good choice here. It's exactly what my deck is designed to do. I race, and I win this race here. And it's pretty safe because I have the Harsh Rule in my hand, and I can always keep it back to block if anything goes wrong. Yep, and I get a... And this is one of the reasons why I have 2 Spirit Guides in the deck. Because my deck is always racing, my life total is always pretty low, so having some way of gaining life late in the game is pretty good. But that was a dicey game though. My opponent's draw was amazing. He even ambushed my attacker using a Iron Umbran Reaper me 3 times. One of those times hurt me. One of those times it did 5 damage to me. The other 2 I negated using the Cobalt Waystones. But yeah, that was a very close game. And I think that really showcases how important having Harsh Rule is in the deck. Okay, so here I'm playing against Wings of the Valkyrie. This deck can have some crazy powerful draws, but this time my opponent just played a bunch of 2/2 flyers. In fact, a whole bunch of them. And I have an 8/8 Shelterwing with a hammer, and the Warcry trigger went to another hammer. So I got a 6/9 Copperhall Bailiff here, and then with a bunch of Warcry triggers, a 6/6 Overseer. So this game is going to be over pretty soon here. I have 2 Vanquishes that I have nothing to use on because my opponent's units are too small. Yeah, just attack like this. And I have another Finest Hour in my hand in case anything really weird happens. So I think it's only a matter of time before my opponent will lose all his units. On the next turn, if I attack with everything, he should be dead. Okay, I have no targets for the adjusted card. So we're good. That also means he has 1 more chump blocker here, but I don't think that matters at all. My team is too big, and I have too many... Yeah, well, normally when the flyers won't be blocked, but against this deck, it turns out every card in their deck also flies. So, oh, whoops, I should have just... Oh, that was dumb. I'm sorry, I was busy talking and didn't do any math in my head. I should have Finest Hour one of the unblocked units, and that would have ended the game. But it also would have been faster if I played the hammer and hit him in the hammer instead, but... what's a few seconds here and there? So in this game, I'm playing against Student of Time, and as expected, he just curved out 2, 3, 4, 4, 4, and I just played a turn 4 Shelterwing and put a hammer onto it and attacked him a couple of times, and yeah, just 2 hits. So, sure. And I played a Copperhall Bailiff and shrunk his entire team, and now I'm in really good shape. Wait, is that something we want to save. Because next turn I attack him for 8 and Finest Hour this and he dies. Alternatively, I save this now and pump it and make it flying and he still dies. Let's do it the safe way, because now I can also block with it if I really want to. Yeah. I'll take 3. Yep, and that's it. Another Finest Hour. Okay, so multiple ways to win this game at this point. And this is another very typical game against AI. They play a bunch of things that don't matter. You shrink it, or you just basically block it and or take some damage, and then you finish him off in the air very quickly. Okay, here I'm playing against Winds of Destiny, and as we have scripted, my opponent played a bunch of things on the ground that don't really matter. They got shrunk by the Bailiff, so most of them can't attack. We have plenty of removal spells for the big units, but we're just hitting him in the air for 5, 5 or 8 damage per turn, and he is very close to being dead here. We have a hammer that we can use, but I don't even think we need to. Let's go ahead and kill the 5/4 here, and then hammer his O2 for free. And my opponent should be dead next turn, barring anything really unusual. Because even if he kills my 5/5 here, I can still make this into a flying unit, and that will finish him off. Between 3 damage and 2 damage here, he's at 4 life. But here we absolutely kill him because we just hammer that, and we swing in for the win. Yep, another easy win, exactly as we have scripted it. Like I said, most Gauntlet games you play is going to end up like this. They're just going to have a bunch of things on the board, on the ground, that are kind of medium to small size. None of them matter if you just play a Bailiff or a bunch of 2 to 3 or 4 health units. Oh no, my son's awake. So this will be the last video for the night. And then you just hit him for 5, 3, 5, 8 damage in the air, and the game ends very quickly. So here we're playing against a boss and multi-faction units. I don't have too many. In fact, I think I only have the Shelterwing Riders in my entire deck. This might be kind of rough, actually. Well, especially 1 power. This might be a game where the harsh rules become really handy. But let's take a look at our first hand. This hand is really good. This is a very good turn 2 blocker. Although, if every multi-faction unit is +1/+1, this is not going to block my opponent's 2-power unit usually. And that could be problematic. I think what I'll do instead is play the 2/1 out there as a chump blocker so that I can draw another Justice. I think that's very important here. Yeah, that's very problematic. I need to draw a power first of all. And I'm hoping he plays another unit that can block this and kill it. I really need him to block this and kill it. Oh, jeez. Okay, well, I drew a power. That's fantastic. Now that I draw a power, I'm having second thoughts because... Well, no, I can still hammer this, so I can always kill it, and I can always silence it. So, but I don't want to lose this for no value anymore. I'm just going to play the Waykeeper, and I'm going to use this to block his 3/4. Yep. Alright, so with that Justice, I will be able to hammer this if I need to. Or I can simply start silencing things, because I think the best play I have is I silence... I think I'll silence this. I'll silence the Golem. I'm going to block the 3/3 here, and then I'm going to Finest Hour my Enforcer, killing this. I'll take the 3 from that and let him infiltrate, that's fine. On the following turn, I will hammer this. Yeah, that's fine. Because I'd rather not getting him a free card, a free weapon. Yeah, this is the block here. And I'm going to go ahead and Finest Hour this and hope that he doesn't have a removal spell, and he doesn't. Okay. Wow, I'm taking a lot of damage because his units are big. This is a really bad matchup for us because we are going to have a really tough time racing something like this. Jeez. We're going to have to hope to grind out his deck here. So, change of plans. I'm going to go ahead and kill the 6/4 here because that's way more damage. And the idea here is I will block the 3/3 with this Finest Hour, killing that. I'll take the 3 from his Swift Blade, but on the following turn, I play the other hammer and killing that. Or I can just chump block it. Maybe I'll just chump block it actually, now that I'm thinking about it. No, I'll lose the hammer. I think this unit will have some use later on. Ooh, if I only have the power to play this. Okay, I really hope he doesn't have any tricks, but in these colors there shouldn't be any tricks. So let's hit him for 4. So finally we have stabilized and we're going back on the offensive. We do have a silence effect for his next unit. Oh, perfect. Vanquish is... What? No. Yeah, Vanquish is perfect. We're gonna play the Valkyrie Enforcer for no value here. I mean, no silencing effect here. But I think this increases the clock by quite a bit. And it looks like my opponent has some kind of reactionary spell in his hand. Okay, well that's unfortunate. Do I just go ahead and... I'm just gonna go ahead and hammer that actually. Because putting the Permafrost onto it, I still can't hammer it, which is kind of annoying. And the Permafrost can kill units of any size, so no matter what he plays now, I can Permafrost, whereas the hammer can kill the 3/3, but it may not be able to kill his next card. Okay, so things got a little dicey in the beginning, but my opponent flooded out a little bit, and our draws were really good, so we were able to get the win for that one. But that Gauntlet boss is pretty bad for us, because we have basically just 4 cards in our entire deck that benefits, but every one of his cards benefit, and they were all pretty good cards. Alright, so that's the first Gauntlet boss. And I'm going to do another Gauntlet right now, and see if I can record another Gauntlet boss fight for you.